Sunday dinner, chicken roast, red wine, and my daughter called me a widower with memory issues right before announcing she'd started the house sale. Name's Ellis 68, retired civil engineer. The applewood chair I built in '89 was still under me, but I suddenly felt like the guest. The gravy was hot, but the room turned cold. Ever felt your life slowly rewritten in front of you without your pen? What would you have said at that table? My daughter moved back in the year after my wife died. Said it was to keep me company, but I knew better. She came in with a planner, a box of supplements, and that tone in her voice, like she was reading instructions off a label. The first week, my old recliner went missing. We donated it, Darla said, brushing off my questions like lint from her blouse. You shouldn't be slumped like that all day, Dad. Bad for circulation. That recliner had a groove in it that fit my back like a loyal hound. It squeaked when I leaned too far, had a coffee stain from 2004, and a small rip where Lenore once caught her knitting needle. I'd fixed the tear with fishing line. It held. Now in its place sat a modern beige thing with no soul. Ergonomic, Randall said, patting the back of it like a prized horse. He'd moved it in while I was out picking up groceries. I didn't remember asking for help, but Randall helped anyway. We're upgrading the flow of the room, he said, shifting the TV to face the sunroom instead of the fireplace. The fireplace had been cold since Lenore passed, but I still liked looking at it. By week 3, my morning coffee tasted like grass, herbal tea. Caffeine aggravates your blood pressure, Darla said, handing me a green smoothie that looked like pond water. I drank it. I didn't complain. That became my rhythm nod sip swallow. One afternoon, I pulled out the good tablecloth. The one Lenore used on Sundays, slightly frayed at the corners, embroidered with golden leaves. I laid it across the dining table, smoothing each wrinkle like a priest dressing an altar. Darla came in moments later with a new one, gray synthetic. It's machine washable, she chirped, folding Lenore's cloth with an automatic efficiency that made my chest feel hollow. We ate quinoa that night. Randall called it superfood. Teslin poked at it with her fork, one AirPod in her eyes darting between me and her phone screen. She asked for $20. For the movies, she said. No, please, barely a thank you. Later, I wandered into the living room. The photos were gone from the mantel. The black and white one of Lenore in her wedding dress, my brother's navy portrait, the Polaroid of Teslin as a toddler in Lenore's arms. All missing. I opened the sideboard. Inside, beneath a pile of utility bills and some folded towels, I found the photo of Lenore, placed face down, still in its frame, untouched, unbroken. I sat down in the new chair, the one that didn't squeak, and stared out toward the yard. The apple trees swayed under the early October breeze, their scent curling in through the mesh of the window. We planted those trees in 1989. Lenore wanted Honeycrisp. I wanted Fuji. We compromised and got both. That's marriage. That night, long after the house had quieted and the dishwasher had hummed its last cycle, I stood outside under the stars. The grass was cold dew already settling in. I touched the bark of the first apple tree we ever planted, rough and gnarled, just like my hands. I think they're just waiting me out, I whispered to the wind to Lenore. And I think they might win. The tree didn't answer, but the breeze carried that old applewood scent, earthy, familiar, and sharp enough to sting the eyes. I noticed my checking account dropping faster than usual. And I wasn't the one spending it. At first I thought it was just the heating bill. Winters in Wilmington aren't harsh, but this year had teeth. It started with a bounce check. The pharmacy. I'd gone to pick up my cholesterol refill, and the clerk tilted her head and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Cranford, your payment didn't go through." I shuffled home with a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my arteries. Darla and Randall weren't there. The house was still. My old study had become Randall's command center. Dual monitors, cables everywhere. One of those ring lights influencers use. On the desk, my leather blotter was gone, replaced by a pad that read, Midtown Property Solutions. The manila folders were stacked with neat but meaningless labels, Renovations Q1 Roof Scope, Equity Recalc. I opened the bottom drawer, just instinct, and found a jumble of old bills and loose paper. And there, folded in half and stained with a brown crescent coffee or tea. Hard to tell, was the house deed. Lenore and I had signed it in 1991. We took out a small second mortgage to fix the roof after Hurricane Bob grazed us. I remembered her fingers trembling that day. Paperwork always rattled her. She dotted the I in her name with a tiny circle. Now her signature sat creased, shadowed by a blot. I ran my thumb over it as if I could smooth it back to clarity. Later that afternoon, I confronted Darla. I brought it up. I noticed some big withdrawals from the joint account, I said, keeping my voice flat. She didn't blink. Roof repairs, Dad, and the HVAC, and we're thinking solar might boost resale. Resale? Down the line, for Teslin. Randall joined the conversation, leaning against the doorframe with a protein shake in hand. You gotta think long-term, Ellis. We're optimizing. Besides, your name's still on everything. You're not losing anything. It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. Like they were cheerfully digging a hole with garden gloves on. I called the bank the next morning, sat on hold for 27 minutes. The woman on the line was courteous but firm. Yes, Mr. Cranford, we have a valid power of attorney on file. It allows Ms. Darla Wexley to manage all household and investment accounts. When was that filed? August 19th, 2016. I remembered that date. It was 2 weeks after Lenore died. I had signed dozens of condolence cards, checks to florist forms from the funeral home. But I hadn't signed that, not that. I asked them to send a copy. 2 days later, it arrived. The signature was close to mine, but slanted wrong. The loop on the C in Cranford was too high. That night, the house was quiet again. Teslin was out. Randall had a networking dinner. Darla was upstairs. I sat in the living room, Lenore's photo back on the sideboard, angled to catch the room like she used to watch over our guests. I marked the copy of the deed with a yellow sticky tab, the kind Lenore used when we filed taxes, and slid it underneath the frame. We signed this together, didn't we? I whispered. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the windows. The blinds cast narrow shadows across the floor lines like prison bars stretching from carpet to wall. In the silence, I heard the creak of the applewood trees. Some roots run deeper than others. I just wanted air, a walk to nowhere. Instead, I ran into the one man who once called me the stubbornest damn engineer in the state. Marion Delancey. Mo, to the 4 people still alive, who remembered the old bridge projects, was leaning on the rail at the far end of the Cape Fear Riverwalk. Same windbreaker from 1983. Same hat that had once been white. He didn't look up when I approached, just said, "You're still taking corners like you're drawing them." I chuckled, more air than sound. Hard habit to break. He turned, eyes sharp despite the crow's feet. "You look tired, not old, just tired." I could say the same. I don't live with vampires. I laughed then, a real laugh. It hurt a little deep in the chest. We stood there for a minute watching a tugboat churn past, trailing a wake that made the pilings groan. "Still sketching?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not in years." "What?" He pulled a folded blueprint from his jacket, no reason, just muscle memory, and unwrapped it like a sandwich. Inside was blank paper and a pen. "Humor me. Draw something." I hesitated, then leaned on the rail and drew. Nothing elaborate, just the curve of the bridge we stood on, the way the beams met under the walkway, a line for the river's edge. My hand trembled once, but the line stayed true. Mo took the paper and squinted. "You've still got your drafting hands, Ellis, but you're letting people redraw your life." That one stung. He folded the sketch like scripture and tucked it into his coat. We walked without talking, just the crunch of gravel underfoot. The path veered past a park bench with peeling paint. Someone had left a bag of kettle corn there untouched. From behind us popped Teslin, her voice surprisingly soft. She was holding a cup from the ice cream stand, looking unsure. "Aunt Darla said you wandered off." I walked. There's a difference. She glanced at Mo, then at the paper in his hand. "What's that?" "A sketch," I said, "of the bridge." She looked at it, eyebrows rising. "That's kinda cool." "Did you draw that?" I nodded. "I didn't know you could draw." "Used to. Almost went to architecture school. Then life had other plans." She bit her lip. You think I could ever be a chef? I mean, not like TV chef, famous, but real. A real one. That stopped me. I studied her for a moment, the way she held the cup fingers, fidgeting the way she didn't look away. Not this time. I think, I said slowly, if you care more about feeding people than impressing them, you've already got the hard part down. She smiled, small real. Mo checked his watch. You ever want to build something again, life included, you know where to find me. We watched him walk off toward the parking lot, that folded napkin still sticking out of his coat pocket like a secret map. The wind picked up then, and I caught the faintest trace of sawdust and river air. Sometimes all it takes is one line drawn. True to remember the rest of the design. Sunday dinner, chicken roast, red wine, a family of 4. And then she said it. The table was set just so Darla liked symmetry. The napkins were cream with burnt orange trim matching the placemats. A candle flickered in the middle, throwing unflattering shadows across everyone's faces. The smell of rosemary and lemon hung heavy in the air, masking the tension only slightly. We were halfway through the meal when Randall raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. Charlotte's calling and they want me to lead expansion. It's a big deal. Regional VP. Darla clinked her glass against his. Teslin raised hers half-heartedly, eyes flitting back to me. Congratulations, I said, more form than feeling. Of course we'll all be moving, Darla added, dabbing at her lips with her napkin. Teslin will finish high school in Charlotte. It's a good school district. I blinked. All of you, she nodded. And we've started the process of getting the house appraised. It's really for your benefit, Dad. My benefit. You've been forgetful lately. You left the hose running all night last week. And the burner, remember the burner incident? I clenched my jaw. I remember the burner. Randall leaned back in his chair. We just want to make sure things are in place. For later. Later, Darla exhaled long and loud. For long-term care, Dad. Just in case. I'm not an invalid. No, but... And I don't recall agreeing to sell my house. The room tightened. Even the candle seemed to still. Randall let out a chuckle. Come on, Ellis, it's just property. Sentimentality won't pay for in-home care. Darla's voice snapped. Shut up, widower. Everything stopped. Even Teslin froze fork midair. The word hung in the room like a wrong note in a concert hall. I looked at Darla. Her hand trembled slightly around her wine glass. Randall stared at his plate. Teslin dropped her fork. I stood slow and deliberate. My knife lay untouched beside the chicken. I left it there. I built bridges that carry weight. I said, voice level. You've become the weight. No one spoke as I walked out. The hallway was dim, the framed photo of Lenore catching the light like a witness. I opened the sideboard drawer. Inside was the original deed, still creased, still coffee-stained. I smoothed the corner with my thumb, then reached for a blank note card from the drawer. I sat at the desk in the living room, the one that used to be mine before Randall claimed it. I wrote slowly, each letter pressed firm. To whom it may concern, effective immediately. I revoke all previously granted power of attorney permissions. Future decisions regarding my estate or person will be made by myself unless I choose otherwise. Sincerely, Ellis W. Cranford. I signed it. Then I opened my wallet. Mo's card was still tucked inside, folded but clean. The corners had softened, but the ink was sharp. I held it for a moment, then placed it next to the note card. Outside, a summer breeze tapped the window panes, warm, but carrying the bite of change. I didn't know what came next, but I had just drawn the first line. I left the letter on the kitchen counter right under Randall's favorite coffee mug, the one with the golf joke printed in faded blue. I placed the house key beside it, turning it once so the teeth faced up. The morning air held a sharpness I hadn't felt in years. Not cold exactly, just clean. Wilmington was waking slowly the way old port towns do, foghorns in the distance, gulls complaining from the marina. I wore my gray windbreaker and carried a duffel bag Lenore once used for weekend trips. It still smelled faintly of cedar and lemon. Exit 47A had been a running joke. Every time we drove south and past it, I'd say, "There's my escape route." Lenore would laugh, squeeze my hand. This time I took it. At the lawyer's office, the walls were beige, and the magazines old. Cantry was prompt a man in his 60s with square glasses and a neutral tie. "You understand the terms, Mr. Cranford?" "I do." He slid the papers toward me. The house deed transferred with stipulations. Held by GSP Trust until further notice. A fire break. A line in the sand. My hand trembled slightly as I took the pen. I pressed the point to the signature line. The stroke was steady. When I finished, Cantry nodded. "We'll file this by end of day. You'll receive confirmation at your P.O. box." "Thank you." Next stop, the bank. I chose the smaller branch on Dawson Street, the one Lenore and I opened our first account in. A young clerk with a striped tie raised his brows when I showed my ID and requested the full withdrawal. "All of it, sir, the joint account, transferred. Into this new one, under my name only." "Certainly. Would you like checks or a card?" "Neither." The transaction took 20 minutes. I left with a slim envelope tucked inside the duffel. At home, I moved quietly. Darla was at the gym. Randall had a breakfast meeting. Teslin was asleep, earbuds and mouth open slightly. I paused at her doorway. For a second, I nearly walked in. Said goodbye, said something, but I didn't. I zipped the duffel, slid in the framed photo of Lenore wrapped in one of her old scarves yellow with sunflowers. This time, I wasn't hiding her. I was taking her with me. At the Wilmington bus depot, the platform was empty except for a man sleeping on a bench and a woman eating pretzels from a Ziploc. The bus pulled in on time, route southbound, no questions asked. I climbed aboard and took the third seat back window side. The driver nodded. I nodded back. The bus hissed, shifted. As we pulled from the curb, I glanced once toward the house, its roof just visible above the maple trees. And then I turned forward. The sunrise flared briefly in the bus window, catching the edge of the photo frame tucked in my bag. A glint. Not blinding, just enough. Hours later, I checked into a motel near Carolina Beach. The lobby smelled like bleach and salt. The room had floral curtains and a twin bed that creaked. On the nightstand, under a stack of local brochures, I saw it. Art classes for seniors, no experience required, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I picked it up, folded it once, slipped it into my jacket. Tomorrow I'd see what it meant to draw again. This time not for Bridges, for me. The room smelled of turpentine and stale coffee. It smelled like something waking up. A long table ran the length of the room, its surface freckled with paint splotches and pencil nicks. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside, gulls shrieked over Carolina Beach, but in here, there was a kind of hush, broken only by the soft clink of paint jars and the scraping of chair legs. I sat at the far end, clutching a brush that had once belonged to Lenore. The handle had a faint crack near the base, worn smooth, where her fingers used to rest. I hadn't painted since high school, drafted, sure measured, calculated, but not painted. Not like this. Francine leaned over my shoulder. "That's a good line, Ellis." Confident. I looked down at the thick streak of blue across the paper. It didn't look like much. "Looks like a bruise," I muttered. She chuckled. "That's okay. Even bruises have shape." Francine had a way of talking that felt like wind chimes. She wore mismatched earrings and always had a pencil behind her ear. She moved slowly but never lazily. She circled the room, pausing beside each student's canvas, offering small comments with a red pencil. "Sometimes we need to make space for color again," she said once, tapping my shoulder. "White walls don't hold memories. You have to paint them in." By the third class, I'd stopped apologizing for my brushwork. I started to enjoy the way paint bled into corners, how the bristles whispered when dragged sideways. I even stayed after one session to help clean up. That Thursday, Mo visited. He knocked on my apartment door with his usual 3-rap rhythm and came in carrying a long cardboard tube. "Blueprints?" I asked. "Not today. Just wanted to see how you're living." He whistled when he saw the paintings lined along the hallway wall. "Well, look at you, putting up a gallery." I shrugged. "Helps the place feel less like a rental." Mo unrolled one of his old blueprint sheets and pinned it above the largest canvas, a mess of oranges and burnt umber that Francine said reminded her of weathered brick. "Balance," Mo said. You always had a knack for it, even back when we were building that overpass near Durham. You mean the one that ran 4 months over schedule? Still stood straight, that's what matters. That night, I stayed late in the art room alone. Francine had left the door unlocked. I opened a new canvas and didn't sketch first, just painted. A curved line, then a truss, then cables. I painted the bridge I never finished. The one Lenore and I used to dream about spanning the marshland near her childhood home. I had drafted it years ago but shelved it when we moved east. Stroke by stroke, I built it again. But this time the pylons were rooted in waves of color. Not steel, not rebar, just memory. When I finished, I sat back. My shoulders ached, but I felt light. On the small shelf beside my desk, the photo of Lenore stood upright. I dusted the frame that morning, no longer hidden in drawers. She belonged here. The next morning, a postcard slid under my door, a bluebird on the front, Teslin's loopy handwriting on the back. Grandpa, I want to visit. Just me, if that's okay. I held the card for a long time, thumb grazing the edge. Sometimes bridges aren't just for leaving. Sometimes they bring someone home. The knock was soft. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to get up to walk past the open sketchbook and the cold mug of tea and to turn the knob. Teslin stood on the porch clutching a small tin in both hands. She looked older, but not by much. Her hair was longer, pulled into a low bun, and she wore a line cook's apron over a denim jacket. Hi, Grandpa. These are still warm. I stepped aside, nodded her in. We sat at the little round table by the window. I fetched the tin china cup, Lenore's favorite, and filled it with Earl Grey. I didn't ask if she liked tea. I just poured. Smells like your house used to, she said. How's work? It's greasy, she said, then smiled. But good. I plate sides at Joe's Diner, and they let me make the Sunday special now and then. I made these from scratch. She opened the tin, sugar cookies uneven and a little over-browned at the edges, but they smelled like the kitchen Lenore used to command. I took one and broke it in half. I messed up, Grandpa, she said softly. I let them speak for me. I let them turn your house into I don't even know. You were young, they were loud. She bit her lip. I don't want to become them. I reached across the table, rested my hand over hers. Then don't. Be you. Be better. She blinked quickly, nodded, ate her cookie in silence. Outside, wind pushed a pine branch against the window. Inside, everything stayed still. I showed her my latest painting, a still life of 2 empty chairs under the apple tree. You painted this? She asked. Tried. She tilted her head. That shadow's good. Real. We moved to the small shelf beneath the canvas. I pulled out a thin brush, handed it to her. You ever try drawing, Demille? She smiled, half curious. Not yet. My phone buzzed. A message from Darla. We should talk. I turned the phone face down, took another cookie. Teslin looked around the apartment. The knock was soft. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to get up to walk past the open sketchbook and the cold mug of tea and to turn the knob. Teslin stood on the porch clutching a small tin in both hands. She looked older, but not by much. Her hair was longer, pulled into a low bun, and she wore a line cook's apron over a denim jacket. Hi, Grandpa, these are still warm. I stepped aside, nodded her in. We sat at the little round table by the window. I fetched the tin china cup, Lenore's favorite, and filled it with Earl Grey. I didn't ask if she liked tea. I just poured. Smells like your house used to, she said. How's work? It's greasy, she said, then smiled. But good. I plate sides at Joe's Diner, and they let me make the Sunday special now and then. I made these from scratch. She opened the tin. Sugar cookies uneven and a little over-browned at the edges. But they smelled like the kitchen Lenore used to command. I took one and broke it in half. I messed up, Grandpa, she said softly. I let them speak for me. I let them turn your house into I don't even know. You were young, they were loud. She bit her lip. I don't want to become them. I reached across the table, rested my hand over hers. Then don't. Be you. Be better. She blinked quickly, nodded, ate her cookie in silence. Outside, wind pushed a pine branch against the window. Inside, everything stayed still. I showed her my latest painting, a still life of 2 empty chairs under the apple tree. "You painted this?" she asked. "Tried." She tilted her head. "That shadow's good. Real." We moved to the small shelf beneath the canvas. I pulled out a thin brush, handed it to her. "You ever try drawing, Emile?" She smiled, half curious. "Not yet." My phone buzzed. A message from Darla. "We should talk." I turned the phone face down, took another cookie. Teslin looked around the apartment. "I like it here." "So do I." The sunlight hit the edge of the cookie tin, casting a golden ring across the table. "I'll come again," she said, "if that's okay." "Anytime, just knock like you did, not too loud." We finished our tea, and for the first time in a long while, Sunday didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something beginning. The last light of evening caught the edge of Lenore's photo, now framed in soft wood, and hung above the table where the sugar cookies had been. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon and varnish, a scent I hadn't realized I missed until now. Some bridges are built from memory, others from choice. I learned that boundaries don't mean walls, they mean honoring what still stands inside us. Quiet strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it just sets the tea, waits by the door, and forgives without needing to forget. If you're in the middle of a loss or caught in someone else's storm, know this: you can still draw the map home. Have you ever found healing in an unexpected visit? I'd love to hear your story below, or feel free to subscribe if this quiet rebellion spoke to you.